Hello and welcome to our webinar, Why Charity Partnerships Matter to Your Business. I'm Sam Candy, CEO of Responsible Futures, and we are delighted to be here today to discuss the importance of charity and community partnerships and how it can benefit all. I'd like to thank our partners in this webinar, ActionFunder, an organisation that enables businesses to fund community action and celebrate the impact. In a world where boardrooms are full of chat about ESG, ActionFunder makes it easy to walk the talk on social responsibility. Businesses use ActionFunder's tech platform to identify and work with local communities best placed to create real change, and do it fast because the world won't wait. Social value has the potential to release millions of pounds for community benefit. It encourages smarter spending to not only deliver a proposed service, but also address social, economic and environmental issues in the local community. But better than that, it helps to engage, enable and empower people inside and outside of your organisations to work together in the pursuit of social, economic and environmental well-being. Social value helps with stakeholder engagement, employee engagement and retention, improves mental health and well-being, and helps build a diverse and inclusive workforce, attract talent. It can improve your brand reputation and change the lives of the community around you. Before we start, Mark, I just want to hand over to you, our partner from ActionFunder.
Great, thanks, Sam. First of all, thanks so much for hosting this. You're great at this, so I'm looking forward to the conversation. But also thanks to all our panelists. It's really lovely to have you on here. So Charlotte, Chris and Michelle, I'll let you introduce yourselves and hand back to Sam, but really delighted. And, let's have a proper chat about this. Let's not leave anything behind. Let's say some things that we really believe in that might be a bit controversial or not. And get under the skin of this. There's never been a better time to look at how businesses can step up and really help local communities, given the cost of living crisis and other things going on. So looking forward to it, but thank you for being involved. And the audience, thank you for joining as well. So back to you, Sam.
Thank you. So why don't we start with some introductions? Charlotte, shall we start with you?
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. My name is Charlotte Hill, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Felix Project. For those of you who don't know us, we rescue surplus food that is very good quality food that would otherwise go to landfill. And we sort it in our 4 depots and or turn it into meals in our kitchen. And then we take it out to 1,000 community partners all across London who are serving often those most at risk in our communities. And we did over 30 million meals last year, to give you a sense of the scale that we do that at. So it is a huge operation, and we need 4,000 volunteers to make that all happen. So that's us in a nutshell, but I'm looking forward to telling you more throughout the course of the webinar.
And we're looking forward to hearing it, and you do great work, and we're really looking forward to hearing more on that. Chris, let's turn over to you.
Yeah, morning everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm Chris Dooley, Head of Social Impact at JC&Co UK. JC&Co is the world's leading outdoor media owner. So we provide public amenities and facilities for cities, transport networks, and in partnership with private landlords such as airports, shopping malls and supermarkets, and all of those amenities and services are funded by advertising.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, so again, thanks for having me. My role is Social Value Lead for Jacobs. I cover the UK and Europe region. And within that role, I'm responsible for sort of articulating, measuring and understanding what impact we make locally and corporately as an organisation. But for those of you who don't know, Jacobs are a global engineering and professional services consultancy. So we have clients such as NASA, and we also have clients such as HS2, National Highways, etc. So we get a lot involved in a lot of sort of big UK-based infrastructure projects, which are obviously ultimately trying to solve some kind of societal problem. So our role in that and how we deliver those projects is really crucial to kind of supporting that overall aim and ambition for those kind of big infrastructure spends.
Thank you. And Mark, you gave a brief hello before, but if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So Mark Shearer, co-founder and CEO of ActionFunder. The best way to describe what we do is we're a speed dating funding platform enabling company grants to match with and fund community projects. For us, this is all about creating a really good value exchange so that you have businesses can really build their brands, they can get that, they can build their social capital and their social value. And on the flip side, the non-profits can get the support they need for their projects with funding and connecting with companies and their grants. So back to you, Sam. Thanks for that.
Good. Well, we're excited to hear all of your points today. As mentioned before, social value at the moment, the cost of living crisis, it's really, really heavy for a lot of people right now. Charlotte, do you want to talk a bit more about that and what's really going on and how bad it is? Because I think it's important to really show what is going on.
Yeah, of course. And you'll get to know over the next hour. I'm a glass half full kind of person, but I think that there is no way to put a good shine on the challenges facing our communities at the moment. So we, as I said, have 1,000 community partners who we provide food to. Now, these could be homeless shelters, women's refuges, but increasingly, actually, they're primary schools. We are getting about 40 primary schools a week getting in touch because teachers are telling us children are coming to school hungry because they can't afford food. I was speaking to one of our partners the other day, and there are now increasingly children going into school with empty packed lunch boxes because parents are too ashamed to send their children in with nothing, but they can't afford school meals or food to put in those packed lunches. We've recently done a survey out with YouGov of Londoners who are working Londoners. So these are people in work, but who are low paid. Already 4 in 10 of them are not turning on their cookers because they can't afford their energy bills, of these low paid workers. Almost half of the parents we spoke to are already skipping meals themselves so they can feed their children. And 1 in 10 of those surveyed, and bear in mind, these are the working poor, have about £2.50 a day to spend on food. £2.50 on their breakfast, their lunch and their dinner. So it is incredibly challenging out there. And every single one of our 1,000 community partners is asking us for more food. They are all saying that they cannot meet the demand of their services with the food we supply. And outside of that, we have a waiting list of about 478 charities who have asked us for food and we cannot currently service. And I say about 478 because at the moment it's going up by about 40 a week. We're getting 40 new people who are validated on our waiting list asking for food every week. And we are a London-based, this is within the M25, just to give you a sense of the scale I'm talking about. So it is incredibly challenging out there. And then these charities, alongside having increasing demand, their own costs have gone up really, really significantly. So if I look at my own charity, our costs have gone up by 25% at least in year. We run huge depots with huge fridges and freezers and blast freezers. And, it's a big logistical operation. All of our energy bills have gone up, a terrifying amount. We've got a fleet of 45 vehicles that drive our food all over London and pick up the food and rescue it. All of the costs for those vehicles has gone up. Putting fuel in those vehicles is incredibly more expensive than it was. We're proud to be a London living wage payer, which means we've just recently also increased all of our salaries in line with the London living wage. There is just a huge amount in terms of costs going up. The other thing I would say, and I hope we can have this conversation here, is also we rely on 4,000 volunteers a year to do what we do. And our community partners, these grassroots community partners, they rely on volunteers too. Now, we are really proud that we really represent the communities we serve with those volunteers. But increasingly, people are telling us they can't afford to volunteer at the moment because they're taking on an additional job or they've got increased caring responsibilities as the cost of living goes up. And so actually, our dependence on corporate volunteers is really going up. So a really important way that corporates can help is of course with money, and we'll come on to talk about all of this, but also with time, because actually those who are struggling themselves don't have the time to volunteer as much. And so a really important way to support charities is also with your corporate volunteering time, as well as money and resource and all of the other things that can be done. But it is incredibly bleak. We thought the pandemic was bad. The demand is incredibly higher than it was during the pandemic. This is a crisis of a scale. This cost of living crisis is of a scale that we didn't see, and we haven't got the same financial support for people that they had in the pandemic. So it is, yeah, I mean, I could talk about it for ages, but you get the sense it is incredibly challenging for people out there and for the community organisations who are trying to serve them.
Yeah, I think it's very hard hitting, but it's so important to hear. Mark, how important then, a lot of the people that are here today listening are from businesses and working in social value and CSR and sustainability. How important are those business partnerships and what do they mean?
Yeah, Sam, look, it's a really good question. And Charlotte is very articulate in explaining the situation. And, it's really bleak. But there's never been a better time for companies to get involved. And I really mean that for two reasons. One is that there is the demand there from the non-profits. They need the help. There needs to be a gap that needs to be filled. And as Charlotte said, the costs are going up. So we surveyed Lorna, our head of marketing, and Chloe put together an amazing report, which we'll post at the end of this on the chat, which we'll release in a couple of hours, looking at what non-profits need. And they said, look, right now we can create more impact with costs, and with certain non-profits like the Felix, they really rely on volunteers as well. So the demand is there. But on the positive side, there has never been a better time for companies to do this, because they can add more value to their business by getting involved and by actually delivering on their ESG now than ever before. And we're working with a number of brands. We're working with almost 40 companies through ActionFunder who have delivered over 80 grant funding campaigns, benefiting almost 400 community projects in our first 15 months. But what's really interesting is the leaders of those companies are all coming back to us and saying, you've added serious value to our business. One chief exec gave me a big hug the other day and said, thank you. You have totally transformed the culture of our business. ActionFunder has done that because they've managed to distribute grants locally and they've got all their employees involved. We've got other brands that we're working with, which is very much a marketing budget, and they're able to, it's an FMCG brand, but they're able to really drive a very clear message to the marketplace and deliver kind of a social benefit around their marketing. So to answer your question, Sam, going back to it, there is the demand there from the non-profits, but also this is the time when companies can step in and create real value to their businesses. And this is almost like a bit of history repeating itself. You look at the kind of the Quakers, the Cadburys and the Roundtrees and so on. These businesses who were so successful, and one of the cornerstones of their business was that they used to look after their local community. And I feel that with the lack of with the lack of public sector funding and grants, this is absolutely the time for a lot of these companies who a lot of them are talking a lot, but it's now time to walk the talk, and to really help those communities that need it. So the timing is right, but the need is very pressing.
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing a lot more positions in companies, head of social value or head of CSR. Michelle and Chris, both of you sit in these positions in your businesses. I'd like to hear from you on your relationships and what we can expect from companies and what kind of things you do. Michelle, shall we start with you and then we'll come over to you, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's we're facing a really challenging period across the board in private sector, which is in no comparison to what Charlotte's just discussed. But I think we have to be quite honest. We've got a bit of a bumpy road ahead, and we're not quite sure how bumpy that road is going to be. The socioeconomic climate is changing daily, and I don't remember a time that it's been like this in my working career, and it's just so uncertain that businesses are having to kind of plan for that uncertainty. And as a result, all that kind of what may be defined as discretionary spending and sort of the nice to have budgets are being scrutinized. And I think we have to be honest about that as a sector. And I think some sectors are going to be more poorly hit than others. You know, that all depending on the sort of the autumn statement and where the government's going to be investing their money is going to have a real knock-on effect with the kind of sectors that are really facing the challenges in these rising costs at the moment. I think the flip side to that is during these times, and we saw this in the 2008-2009 recession, is there's more of a focus on businesses about the additional value they're going to bring to communities and to contracts. And with all the recent legislative changes in procurement around social value, such as a PPN and other things that have come on board, that's really driven this narrative. And at Jacobs, we're seeing, I think, a 500% increase in the number of social value questions we get asked at bid stage. And obviously we have to get into a position where we're going to deliver against these commitments, and part of doing that and part of understanding those communities for us is working with local charities. So we have a few corporate charities that sort of address our ambition and growth around things such as diversity and the things that we want to focus on, like social mobility, but we're actually training our employees at the moment to consider working with local charities that have their ear to the ground really and understand what's happening. And where possible, be giving the kind of support that we can easily give, such as volunteering and the in-kind, when we know that there's going to be some push on budgets for everybody in the future. But I still think it's important to make sure that we're having those kind of conversations and we're not shying away from the reality of the situation we're all facing.
Thank you. And what about you, Chris? How does it fit into your business?
Well, fairly similar to Michelle, actually, in a couple of ways. I mean, firstly, it certainly is a bumpy road ahead, and again, it doesn't compare with what the Felix Project and other charities are facing, but there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of pressure on budget, which I think ultimately means we need to be a bit more maybe creative and imaginative about how we can build partnerships that are genuinely valuable and worthwhile and productive for the charities we support, without relying simply on cash that maybe just isn't available at the moment. But before we get to that, I mean, in terms of JC&Co, again, similar to Jacobs, you know, we have a business that's built on partnerships, largely with public bodies, Network Rail, different city councils around the UK. And we're also seeing this increased pressure, quite rightly, I think, in terms of the social value commitments that we're able to bring to the table for those partnerships. And it's great, actually, some of the projects that we've recently embarked on and these direct charity partnerships that we have, very place-based, often quite local, supporting much more community-focused charities. And often these are cities where we have people, depots, and there's a chance for our people to actually get involved as well. So it's fantastic to be involved in those. And I think that's just going to be scaled up over the years ahead. Something else that we're doing, it wasn't a response to the cost of living crisis, but it's something that I think we needed to do. And we started this year with our community channel project at JC&Co, which is a formal means through which, and this goes back to the issue, you know, cash might not be available, but we can still provide amazing media, publicity, awareness, outdoor advertising campaigns. Something that we have done in pockets over the years, but to try and formalize that, bring some strategy and ultimately greater impact to the organizations that we support, we launched the JC&Co community channel earlier this year. So there's a very straightforward application process for charities to come to us and ask for support. But what we're looking for really are, I'd say, sort of medium-sized charities who will benefit from the scale of what we do, but have also got a clear idea of what they want to achieve, and something that is achievable through outdoor advertising, whether it's a fundraising ask or another awareness ask, and ideally a clear kind of creative understanding of what we do and what's achievable. But that's been a huge success, and I'm really proud of some of the organisations we've been able to support this year, such as Calm, Heart Research UK, White Ribbon at the moment, various environmental charities as well, such as Project Everyone and Just Dig It. So that's, and then the third way that we work with charities, this applies more to the larger charity brands, is what we call our social impact program, where charities still pay to advertise with us, but we offer them significantly increased value in terms of any media that they buy, but also a whole range of additional services and levels of support, be it access to our data and insight teams and capabilities, or creative resource as well. And although that requires charities with marketing budget to spend some of that with us. The level of support and the level of value that we've been able to add over the years to major charities who really benefit from out-of-home advertising and what we do, such as WWF, UNICEF, British Red Cross, is huge, and we're really proud of the impact that we've been able to help create through that program as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important that, you know, that you have a strategy behind it, and that actually you can be more creative with these partnerships, and that they're really thought out. We're hearing the term ESG everywhere, environmental social governance, but the S is the bit that we're talking about here. How can we activate that ESG? How can we put ESG into purpose and strategy? Mark, I want to come to you then.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, there's always acronyms, isn't there? It was CSR, now it's ESG, and so on. And look, what we're hearing is that the S is the more difficult pillar generally for companies, because the E, they find that it's quite technical. They can change light bulbs, retrofit, they're quite physical changes, and you can measure that quite easily as well in terms of the return on cost. The G is very much about your workforce, around the governance around that, and the company, inclusive diversity, etc. And so what we've had is a lot of companies saying to us, well, the S is actually much more tricky. So I think firstly, that's something we're hearing a lot, and to be honest, I can understand that. I think it makes sense. But with regards to companies, I mean, sorry, Sam, can you just repeat the question? I've gone off on a tangent.
No, that's fine. It's just about activating that ESG and how.
And I think for me, it's about what's the most practical way in actually delivering impact at a community level, but also generating value within your business. And in this report, what we've seen is that 82% of recipients said that money, non-profits said that money would give them that's their primary need, but also enable them to create the most impact. And so it's really about, and if that's the primary concern of the business, to develop that impact alongside their brand and their brand purpose. Now, look, giving money is not that easy, right? Because it's hard-earned profit. I totally get that. But this is why it's so important that this interaction needs to lead to a value exchange. So businesses need to benefit from this, because if it doesn't, it's just going to be a one-way street, and the tap's going to turn off eventually. Okay, so I think really what's so important for businesses is looking at how they can do this in a profitable and valuable way. And what we're seeing is it's engaging their employees. There's some great stats around, if you're a purposeful brand, you are more likely to win the war on talent. You're more likely to engage your employees. What Charlotte's doing on the Felix project with regards to that volunteering thing as well, it's so important to employees being there. And most companies rely on that for their success, is that culture and that winning the war on talent. But also, as Michelle said, it's about engaging that giving with the Social Value Act and some of the requirements they're being asked in tenders, so that you're selling smart and selling better. So I think ultimately it's about creating a grown-up conversational relationship between companies and non-profits, and saying, if this is really going to build, and we're going to, and ESG is going to be delivered effectively, it needs to benefit both parties in a very practical way.
Yeah, and for you, Michelle, ESG, I'm sure in Jacobs, is a really, really big priority. So, when it comes to board and strategy and things like that, how activated is it within your business?
Well, yeah, it's interesting actually, because I personally think the sort of traditional definition of reporting against the S of ESG is already outdated. And I actually think employees, communities and clients are expecting more than we traditionally define as the S part, particularly in the UK. And I think because the climate is changing so quickly and in such a state of flux, that the sort of the reporting metrics around S don't always match up with what's actually happening in the real world, and that's where sort of that, you know, ear to the ground charity stuff really kicks in. And back to the point Mark made, you know, those really effective charity partnerships should consist of a long-term shared vision, something that's actually going to bring a positive outcome or some real change, but most importantly that they're mutually beneficial. And at Jacobs, one of the things that we're kind of most proud of is during the pandemic, we actually launched our corporate global giving and volunteering platform. And it was a really useful tool to sort of engage staff at a point when we all felt a little bit helpless. And on that platform, you know, the staff that we work with globally have access to charitable giving opportunities. They can set up group volunteering, they can set up group giving opportunities, and they can also apply for grant funding. And how that's really sort of cemented our S in terms of our reporting is that it's actually given us data that we didn't have before. So we were able to understand where our employees are donating, where our projects are donating to, but with the reassurance of a platform that does a due diligence behind that charity as well. And that's really important because that kind of feeds into the governance aspect of ESG. How do you actually make sure that you are donating to, you know, diligent, responsible charities? And a good example of that was when the war, when the problems in Afghanistan were taking place, and we all sort of rushed to support and pull together a giving opportunity for a whole company to get involved in. But the platform that hosts it for us actually told us that some of those charities that were on there had been taken over by the Taliban, and we should be mindful about not donating to them. And that's a kind of intelligence we just wouldn't have got without sort of thinking about this strategically. So I think obviously for Jacobs, that how we impact society is really embedded into our sustainability strategy. And that has transpired in the UK to be more of a social value focus. But again, back to, you can't track, monitor things that you're not measuring. For us in the UK, we have invested in tools and processes that help us understand what our projects are actually doing, that complement the charity work, but all the other broader topics around social value, such as, you know, volunteering, engaging schools, STEM, all the kind of traditional stuff, as well as the more sort of innovative stuff that our projects are getting up to. But I do think that in the UK, we're leading on this agenda. And I do think from a global company, we've got a lot to learn from where the UK are and how mature they are around the S from ESG.
Thank you. You mentioned about how people are feeling. Chris, I just want to come over to you first, because we've spoke before about how it engages with your employees, and you've told me some great stories before about, you know, what the employee benefit is actually out of social value. I don't know if you want to share a bit more.
Yeah, I think, you know, engagement is the word. You know, that is the overarching benefit for employees. You know, in a sense of belonging to the company. A lot of our charity partnerships or our social value commitments are initiated by employees, whether they're, you know, causes they're aware of or charities that they support in their, you know, their personal lives. I think by bringing, you know, the strength of what we can do as a business, there's a real scaling up that we can bring to their own commitments, which is great. And then it feeds back into the business as well. We love it when, you know, our community channel partners, for instance, we love it when they can come in and talk or do a webinar or a session with our teams to explain what they're doing, and also how we're helping to kind of feed into that, which I think is, it's great for people to see that we do. And we have a company purpose to create real value through the power of the public screen. And I think, you know, that means a lot of things, but part of it does imply that we choose to care and want to do the right thing, and to support our communities, whether they're local, where our people live and work, or some sort of broader causes as well. So it's really important that we have some relevant, valuable partnerships of different sorts that people can get involved with.
For you, Michelle, does it help with attrition rates? Does it help attract new employees? How are you engaging on that side?
Yeah, I think it absolutely has an impact. I think the generation coming through at the moment are much more sustainability focused, social conscious. They want to work for a responsible employer, and we can't ignore that. So how we give back to society is a big sort of focus for us in our talent attraction. I also think some of the one of the charity partnerships we've set up is actually helping with our talent attraction, because we've got a social mobility program running with Upreach, where we're sponsoring 60 undergraduate students across the UK who are from sort of deprived socio-economic backgrounds, and helping them gain employment opportunities in the sector. And that's not just with Jacobs, that's across our whole sector, but we're getting some amazing candidates through that process. So there's a benefit to us in terms of actually attracting staff, but also in terms of our reputation with younger cohort of people that are coming through the business. And, you know, back to that sort of the last point I made around maturity around S, you know, the expectation of the next generation is pretty high, and they're prepared to, you know, the whole concept of working, you know, staying in a job for a long time, job for life, all that kind of stuff that the older generations took for granted, that doesn't exist anymore. And I think we'll see more and more our employees walking with their feet, like the mass, you know, resignation after COVID, if we don't step up and give them the opportunities and act responsibly ourselves. And I think with the kind of charity partnerships that we're talking about as well, for me, they give a lot of softer skills to our employees. So we have some charities where we have senior people on the board, mentoring and doing some pro bono advice around, you know, business development or those kind of opportunities. And then we have more junior staff getting involved in the on-the-ground volunteering and becoming coaches or mentors to individuals, which is amazing soft skills that our employees are gaining through that. And we're really trying to advocate that at the moment. You know, if you can't get that experience in your working environment, you know, look outside, look at what charities are doing and see how you can get involved.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Sorry, Chris, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Not specifically, but yeah, I mean, I recognise so much of that from things that we're doing here at JC&Co, and you know, a true partnership should add value on both fronts. Obviously, our support for charities will hopefully be invaluable. In our case, it's normally around awareness rather than actual funding, but that really does feed back to our people. And again, we have volunteering programs and lots of different ways our people can get involved in their own communities, and it is absolutely invaluable and a big factor in retaining and attracting top talent going forwards as well, which is, you know, worth recognizing. Yeah,
I also think that when, you know, where so many people are still working from home and it is the new norm to be working at home, it actually engages the team even more when you come together and do those partnerships with the charities, that it includes everyone and it really sort of brings them together. Charlotte, do you see that businesses are engaging more with local communities in that way?
Yeah, and actually I was going to say exactly the same point, which is I think since people work remotely so much, when they do come together as a team, there is so much value. So in East London, we've got a depot and kitchen in Tower Hamlets, which is one of the most deprived wards in Europe. But then you walk 15 minutes in the other direction and you're at Canary Wharf, and you have this huge, you know, amount of wealth, but also a great population of corporate partners. And in the kitchen, we produce up to 5,000 meals a day where we use surplus food. We've got a commercial grade kitchen. And the idea was it was set up to feed people who didn't have access to a kitchen, who are homeless. Increasingly, we're feeding people who can't afford to turn their cookers on. But what's been really interesting there is the teams love it. They come from Canary Wharf. They might not have really, some of them haven't seen each other for a year or something. And they will come and, you know that because of the work they are doing that day, someone is going to eat a meal. You know, actually 5,000 people are going to eat a meal that night because of what they've done. And it's physical work. You feel like a bit tired at the end, like rather than sitting at a computer, you've really done something, and it's very immediately impactful, and they love it. And actually bosses, similar to the hug you got, Mark, bosses often come up to me afterwards and like, God, I want you to like kidnap us all, because the vibe you've got here and the energy, and the way, you know, the stuff you've got out of my team, I haven't seen them this energized in ages. So there's a massive benefit. And I'm 100% agree. It's got to be a partnership. Pretty much everyone who works with the Felix project carries on working with us because they get so much value out of it. And that isn't just from the corporate volunteering opportunities. It's the broader, I think, staff engagement of feeling great about it. Also, we are as much an environmental organisation as we are the social impact organisation. One of the biggest, you know, contributors to carbon footprint is food waste. So by supporting us, they are also actually doing a huge amount around the E of their ESG as well as the S. But also, it's, you know, it's just a brilliant, I don't know, it's just a very brilliant thing, not just around staff engagement, retention, recruitment. It's immediately impactful. The return on investment is really high. We can give very clear impact around the return on investment that people get from supporting us. And just thinking of a couple of examples in the current climate particularly. So for example, HelloFresh are one of our big food supply partners, but our costs of going to pick up from Banbury from them were going up. And I met their chief exec, who I know really well, and said, look, here's our challenge. They've been partnering with us for 6 years. Their employees love coming in. Whenever anyone wants to go on a holiday at HelloFresh, they say, look, rather than cancel your order, why don't you send that meal to the Felix project and they can feed someone with it. So we do a huge amount with them, and they support us financially, and they send us loads of volunteers. But then he was like, right, let's solve this problem together. Let's figure out actually when our deliveries from Banbury are coming to London, and actually how can we drop off the food to you rather than you incur that cost. And so actually they've just helped us with a really significant cost saving that actually isn't a financial donation to them. It's us utilising some empty HGV space that they would have had anyway, but we problem solved it together as two teams. And they've solved a massive problem for us and saved us loads of money, but we've not done it with any additional cost to them. We've just done it by genuinely having a partnership where we work together, we solve problems. They want to help us solve problems. We want to help them solve problems. We do it together. Similarly, we spoke to Morgan Stanley, who we work really closely with. They're an amazing partner who are Canary Wharf based, and said, you know what, the demand in the kitchen has gone up so much because so many people need these meals. We want to go up from having 2 shifts in the kitchen a day to having 3. So extending our hours so we can do more meals for the people in need. And they've helped us with a bit of financial, but well, what they've really done is they've said, right, 3 of those evening shifts, we are going to commit to filling for you. We are going to go out to our colleagues in Morgan Stanley. We're going to say, right, instead of going home at whatever time you go to the Felix kitchen, we're going to fill those shifts for you. So it's been great because it's been financial support, but actually in an immediate response to the cost of living, they've given us volunteers to help us fill some evening shifts so we can physically feed more people because of what they're doing. And we can give them very clear data telling them what their people have helped us do really directly to feed Londoners. I mean, so there's some really powerful examples of businesses stepping up in different ways. And it's not always a financial contribution. Don't get me wrong, we need the money. Of course we need the money. But what we really need is long-term committed partners who are going to help us solve the big issues and challenges we have as a business, because we are effectively running a logistics operation. It's got a huge amount, it is a business, it just does social good. The challenge I have is I can't pass any of my increasing costs on to a customer because my customers are charities. So having businesses and business minds who are partners with me, who help me solve those problems, is absolutely invaluable and hugely beneficial for them as well as hugely beneficial for us.
Yeah, that really sort of goes into making the partnership truly work, and that, you know, business is getting back. It's like it's a team building exercise almost, you know, instead of going to the pub, go to the Felix project. And it actually creates a good environment for the work, for the teams, for, you know, people that they've spent a lot of time at home and they want to do something else and they might not want to go to the pub with some of their colleagues. And, you know, it also brings others out of their shell as well to be able to do something. And the biggest thing you can do is give back. But I want to hear a bit more about the benefits to business, and we talked about it before, with retention and with attracting talent, but like, how can those, what other business benefits are we seeing there? Mark, do you have some things that you want to add there?
Yeah, so it depends what the business does. And I think that it's that therefore is quite core to the benefits they can get from delivering social value within their communities. So at Jacobs, it's very much about people, talent, but also the infrastructure and the engineering that you're doing. So forgive me if I jump into this, but so the value there is probably around people, but also around how you can win more tenders. And as we heard earlier, there's a 500% increase in tender questions around ESG, which is great because there's got to be some carrot and stick. Whereas with JC&Co, they're more a media business, and so it's going to be, but they need to obviously, it's going to be collaborations with companies that are buying their space, but it's going to be about reach and eyeballs and how to maximize that and curate interesting stories and be relevant to those communities that they serve. So it really depends on the business, and I think this is where, I mean, we saw a gap in the market. Our background was as an agency delivering community campaigns for businesses, and we just saw that there was lots of peer-to-peer funding networks. There were lots of business-to-business funding networks, but there weren't any really effective business-to-community funding networks, which is why we built ActionFunder. But I think what's so important is not only delivering the benefits, and let me give you one example. We're working with a pub group, with IPA, Green King brand, and they wanted to do a social marketing campaign supporting local sports clubs. And we've worked with them not only through the funding mechanic of the site, but also as an agency, and we've delivered a campaign called Proud to Pitch In. And one of the mechanics was to put QR codes on the point of sale in the pubs and on the side of the cans, so that the publicans or the drinkers could scan the QR code and nominate local sports projects they wanted Green King to fund. Now, that's delivering lots of benefit in the community, and lots of hundreds of sports projects are being funded. But it's also increased visibility and also sales where they need it to. So this is really important, where people are starting to look at their business and see, right, how can we actually deliver something that has a public benefit, but also a business benefit? And I think, Sam, the last thing to mention in this, whilst I speak, is for too long, I think people haven't been measuring the value, the business value of doing this kind of work. It's really tricky. When people ask, well, what impact has that created? It's like, oh God, where do we start? And so what we've tried to do is not only create this dating site so the right grants can match with the right projects, it's very much demand-led, but also once that happens, our site can track not only the stories, which is the really valuable, rich content, that people can see, they can see the updates, so on, but also we send out surveys to the projects when they complete, and that then auto-generates an electronic impact report for any funder. And what we want to do is, one of our chief aims is to continue to evolve and sophisticate that even further and further, so that companies can put something on their CEO's desk or they're in their C-suite and say, look, we've done this social activity and it's created this amount of social value, but also this amount of money and value to our business. And I do think that tracking that value, we need to get more sophisticated, and it needs to be more transparent, so that businesses can see that by doing this, they get a benefit, a financial benefit to their business, because ultimately, most of them, that's how they're incorporated, with shareholders and people and investors are accountable to. But it's getting that win-win. So I think there are some great examples out there where you're seeing businesses really fly by doing social, delivering social programs. And again, it's harnessing the power and really helping the non-profits and the community achieve what they want to, because it's really about helping them. That's the crux of this.
I actually don't think that we should be shy. Sometimes we're a bit careful about saying, look, social value wins business, and we're all looking for more customers. We've seen the work of Patagonia. I've seen lots of adverts coming up on my social media about the relationship that Marks and Spencers have and the charity work that they're doing. This attracts customers. And Michelle, I'm sure you see that a lot in your business, that actually you mentioned before something about you're seeing more questions around social value in the tenders. So are you finding a way to track how your social value is winning business?
Yeah, we are. And I think we are really focused on that sort of data analysis approach to social value. So when I started in my role a couple of years ago, I was very focused on actually, well, what is a problem we're trying to sort out from a work winning point of view and an operational point of view? What do our clients actually want? So very obviously, the company of our size, we can go into that level of data and actually pull out what the trends were. But then in that period, we've had the introduction of all the legislation things. So what we've had to take is a position where we've got a level of consistency because we have 2,000 projects in the UK, for example. If every single project went and did something completely unique and bespoke, it would be very hard for us to actually baseline what impact we make on society. So we had to start to bring in some level of consistency and some kind of reporting so we can actually grow as a business and actually see, a step change in how we approach it. So we thought about the tools and the resources and things that we had at our disposal and what we're going to invest in. And we've come up with an approach that basically empowers projects and employees to make these decisions, whether it's at the sales point of contact with the client or during the delivery of a major program and beyond, but giving them sort of consistent messaging, training tools to do that, and an investment in a reporting tool back to the business. So our reporting tool is a social value bank developed by Symmetrica Jacobs, who we have a partnership agreement with. And in that tool, we can do the transparent reporting that Mark is referring to and actually see that societal impact from some of the activities that we're doing. And there's lots of tools on the market out there at the moment. But for us, it was really important to start tracking. Let's see where we are in our first year of launching the strategy. And we might surprise ourselves. We might be doing even more good than we thought we were. But, unless we are starting to track it, where do we go? But I'll caveat that with, as much as I invest in these tools and use them and encourage people to use them, the qualitative data is just as important, and we shouldn't be fixated on a number, but we do. And we work with commercial people and finance people that understand numbers, so it has become a little bit of reliance on those numbers, but actually it is about outcomes. And working, for example, with someone like Charlotte, has the businesses that work with you achieved what they wanted, whether that is employee engagement satisfaction, but is it helping a number of people in that community to receive an extra meal a week or a day or whatever that's going to be, and therefore feel better and nourished and able to have a better standard of living. So yes, we do rely on numbers, but they're not the full picture for us. We've got to start thinking about the actual impacts and outcomes on people.
I think one of the things, Sam, sorry to jump in, we ask up front really clearly with our corporate partners as we're starting to pawn them is what do you want out of it? And let's not in any way be shy. Like, what do you need out of this partnership? What would we like out of this partnership? How do we make sure it is a genuine value exchange? I'll always remember I was chief exec of a charity called UK Youth prior to doing this. So we ran 7,000 youth clubs across the country, and Ronan Dunn was the chief exec of O2 at the time. And I remember talking to him. We set up this amazing program with O2 called Think Big, which was all about investing in young people in their communities. They did it with us for years. It was a really long term, it was a big investment for O2. And right up at the beginning, I remember sitting down with Ronan, and he was like, I just want to be clear, I'm not doing this because I'm a nice man. I'm not doing this because, I'm doing this because this is really good for my business. These are my employees of the future. These are my customers of the future. These are also, though, this is great for my customer base. He was ruthless about why they were doing it and what they were doing it for. And it was also a totally awesome and amazing program for young people that absolutely ticked all our boxes around what we were trying to achieve for and with young people. So we both were coming at it from slightly different things, but they brought their expertise and investment and skills here. We brought our expertise and, reach into their communities and so on here. The two came together, and it was an amazingly socially impactful long-term program that O2 invested in for years and years and years. And I loved it that Ronan would stand on any platform with me and say, I'm doing this because it's good for my business. He was really honest about it. And that's why it became so embedded, because it was really good for their business. And we were able to show very clearly in a very measured way why this was good for their business. So I don't think we should. I think you're right, Sam. Let's never shy away from it. There's got to be value. And it's going to become anything other than short-term project, if it's going to become a long-term strategic partnership having proper impact on really agreed outcomes, then it's got to have clear value for both. And that should be something we should be really proud to be talking about, because it does mean it's sustainable rather than shying away from.
Yeah, Chris, you have something to add there?
Yeah, I think, Charlotte made a really good point that if you're talking about measurement and attribution, you can't do it retrospectively. You have to have really clear, open, shared objectives that are agreed at the outset that you can actually, work towards. Otherwise, it's just impossible. I think it's interesting to hear some of the stuff Michelle's doing, actually, those frameworks, because I think this is something that we need to, or we're evolving, shall I say, at JC&Co. But I'd like to talk really quickly about what we're doing up in Manchester, which is a good example of our probably most recent significant city-based contract win here in the UK, and it came with a wealth of social value commitments, which we are tracking absolutely and doing very well at, I think, because it was designed to be trackable and reportable. But we are, there's a wide range of things we've committed to do in Manchester. Firstly, in terms of employment and education, we've got some new partnerships with Manchester University. We've also taken on 5 brand new apprenticeships into new roles that were launched this year in Manchester. We've got environmental based partnerships with 2 brilliant charities, Hubbub, who have a fantastic campaign project in Manchester, which we're helping to fund, called In Our Nature. Hubbub are great in terms of sharing annual reporting on the amount of people who've been impacted and action that's been taken on the back of the initiative. We also work with Manchester City of Trees, where we have our people being engaged, have planted 1,000 trees within Greater Manchester this year, which is fantastic. And we're also committed to funding the employment through the Greater Manchester Mayor's charity of a homelessness coordinator in the city centre for a decade, actually. So again, it's a long-term commitment that we are absolutely backing for a number of years at least. We've also got another commitment that we have in Manchester that I think is really quite interesting, quite a creative one for us, is our work with the Community Heartbeat Trust. So a couple of years ago, we found a way to start including defibrillators in our street furniture. A bit of an experiment at first, but I think it's fair to say I always have to choose my words quite carefully. We've been blown away in a positive sense by how well used these devices have been. There's not enough defibrillators in general, and they're not in the right locations. They're not visible enough and accessible quickly enough. So ours are super visible right in the middle of high streets up and down the country. And most of them, well, the highest proportion are in Manchester. We've got 17 in Manchester out of 101 up and down the country. Those 101 defibrillators have been used 330 times in the last 2 years, and we know the survival rates of people who've had that treatment. And it's fair to assume, although there's lots of confidentiality, so it's hard to put an exact number, that dozens of people quite possibly will have had their lives saved through doing that, which is hugely encouraging. And on the back of that reporting and seeing the impact, we're now committed to put in another 200 by the end of 2023 in the UK, and JC&Co as a group have now started. We've got our first defibrillators in the ground in France and Germany as well. So based on the success that we've proven here in the UK, we've started to spread this to other markets.
I think, listening to all of these relationships, partnerships, the things that you're doing, it's so inspiring to hear. And someone mentioned in the chat that they said, they're really struggling to get engagement with challenge events. And I think it's actually about thinking differently and really speaking to those businesses and saying, how can you have a true partnership and real engagement and long-term engagement as well, and not just right, we're going to give you some money and that's it, we're going to turn our back. Chris, did you want to add something to that? Sorry, you're on mute. That's right.
Nothing specific, no, to add.
No, just with regard to, I wanted to quickly touch on long-term relationships. Charlotte, you mentioned it before, and Chris, we have spoken about it before. But Charlotte, if I can ask you the importance of that longevity with businesses and charity partners.
I mean, I always laugh because everyone says, oh, goodness, aren't we facing a lot of uncertainty at the moment? And I think when you run a charity, you're so used to facing uncertainty. I mean, I know the world is uncertain, but we have uncertain food supply because it's surplus. And so by its nature, it's uncertain. We have an uncertain workforce because they're volunteers. We serve a very uncertain community because they are the voluntary sector. If you can't cope with massive amounts of complexity and uncertainty, then definitely mine is not a job you should have. But one of the bits that does give us a bit of certainty is when we have some long-term partnerships, so we can do some longer term planning. So knowing we are going to get some income from a corporate partner over a period of years rather than months really helps with some of that business planning. Knowing that actually they're committed to trying getting people into volunteer really helps with my workforce planning. Knowing that they're going to help us shout about it through their comms channels really helps with wider income generation. So just anything that helps with some form of certainty over a longer period of time, but also means you can have proper shared measurement and impact outcomes. Because if it's a short-term piece of work, it's quite hard. You can say, right, we fed so many people today, but actually, if we can plan something over a prolonged period of time, then we can really see impact. So I think it's more beneficial because you can do more together, but it's hugely beneficial from our side. That said, there are still always short-term things we need. So for example, being opportunistic now, we're opening something called Felix's Table in central London at the moment, which is feeding people who wouldn't be able to afford a decent Christmas dinner in a restaurant standard place. So it's going to be totally awesome, but we need some great corporates to come in and get involved in helping us do it. It's just going to be a 3-month thing over the winter. So we need some people also just to be like, right, actually, we're going to help you do this really immediate thing around the cost of living crisis. But we also need people who are like, do you know what? We also know that next year you need to open a depot in West London. So we're going to be in the long-term planning with you. So of course, there's opportunities for people to do short-term things that are also really impactful. But, give us a bit of certainty, and that certainty can come in some long-term planning that we could do with you.
We're really coming to the end now, and I just want to quickly go round and just have your last sort of tip on what advice you'd give to an organisation that is preparing a social value strategy. Let's start with you, Chris.
I think it's really about working, it's about those partnerships that are mutually beneficial. It's going to be finding a real need, speaking to communities, partners, obviously the charities that you're interested in, and making sure it's something that's relevant to your business, that you're able to create value. If you're not able to fund directly through donations, then what are you brilliant at? What are your skills as an organisation and your strengths, and what are the charities that are most going to benefit through those, and creating appropriate partnerships that way. And again, going back to measurement, having those clear, achievable but ambitious objectives from the start that are measurable as well, so that you can track the impacts. If you've got an objective that is inherently hard to measure, it's going to be hard to prove that what you've done has had an impact, and to perpetuate more of it as well. Brilliant.
And for you, Michelle, your tip on building that strategy?
Yeah, I think when it comes to charities is basically treating it like a business partnership, having those difficult conversations if things aren't working, and giving each other the respect and the opportunities to sort of express and evaluate how things are actually going, even regardless of whether there's an agreement or whatever's in place. Just treat it like there is, and you're working in a business partnership rather than a charity and private sector partnership.
And for you, Charlotte?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, which is this is a relationship, right? It's like any other relationship. You've got a human on one side and you've got a human on another side, or a group of humans. And you've got to form trust. You've got to form shared objectives. You've got to be really clear on what the strengths are you bring on both sides, because it isn't just a value, the business has all the stuff. Actually, charities know an awful lot too, and have roots into communities and things that are of huge value. So just, form the relationship, get talking. If you're having a challenge, talk about it. Be really clear and ambitious and bold about what you're going to achieve together, and communicate.
Thank you. And we're going to finish with you, Mark, our partner for this webinar. So if you want to wrap it up.
Thanks, Sam. So look, we built ActionFunder to get the right money at the right time to the right projects. That's really what we set out to do. And in our mind, never has there been a better time for this to be used and to, and you know, as Charlotte said earlier, the core funding, the long-term partnerships are so important, but also having access to the right money to get these projects off the ground and to incubate and start them. So so I think it's really important that it is about getting the right money at the right time to the right charity and non-profit partners. I think if we can have more people like Charlotte running our business, our charities, I think that we'd be creating more impact. Maybe we need to kind of clone you, Charlotte, and kind of get you out there creating more impact. It's absolutely incredible what you do, and
Thank you.
Admiration. So there's that, but also, you know, we going back to looping right round. You know, there's never been a more important time, and I really would urge people to read our report that's going out over the next. Well, it's going out this afternoon, which really looks into the need at the moment for the non-profits, maybe some of the smaller non-profits, to get funded now and to really create maximum impact when it's needed most. So, but thank you everyone for being part of this. It's been a wonderful discussion and panel. But back to you, Sam, to close it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day. And we will be back in January with another Responsible Futures webinar. We will share more details. And for anyone that didn't get to join, we'll be sharing the recording, so you can then share it with your colleagues and everyone else. Thank you, Michelle, Chris, Charlotte, and our partner, Mark. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you so much. Thanks
for having me.